Good evening to my co-hosts and to our audience. Good morning, good afternoon, or good night. Welcome back to our podcast, the Anarcho-Syndicalist Film Club. This week's film is ParaNorman 2012, selected by today's Pip, Zara. The date is January 2nd, and we are 25 weeks into this online experiment. As always, a spoiler alert if you haven't yet watched the film.
Okay, let's start. Let's start with binary opinions. Christian, count us off.
Christian, I gave it a thumbs down. Sheldon,
I give it a thumbs up.
Yingli,
Thumbs up.
Zara,
Thumbs up.
I am once again the contrarian. I love this.
Who was the contrarian last time? Was it you?
I was.
Okay, cool. We have not achieved unity for a while now, but it does make a better conversation. I guess let's start with anything that anyone's itching to talk about. What are those itches?
If anyone saw this movie before we watched it.
I've been wanting to watch it since it was released in 2012, but I have not gotten around until like a couple days
8
ago.
years later. Yeah.
8 years later, I made it.
Very nice. Okay, because I watched this when it came out in 2012. So for me, this is like a nice refresh. And so I might like it more because I also watched it with my mom. And that gave me a lot of context for how I watched the whole movie, because I was like, oh yeah, this is what I remember when I was a kid. Now I can see like the marketing towards a kid and to adults.
Is there a big difference from watching it now and watching it then? Because I could see how a kid might watch this and how they might react, but I think there are some like things that they're trying to do that might not work for me anymore because I'm a little older and it's not geared towards me, but I feel like it might be more effective on kids.
Yeah, I felt like because it was aimed equally at a kid's audience, like the movie before that Leica did was Coraline, right? Which looks like it's for kids, and then you like watch it with your kid and your kid is like, I want to die. ParaNorman, they definitely flipped the formula and they were like, whoa, okay, we have to figure out how to like actually talk to kids. And so you get that sense plot wise in the language, and then they make a lot of like quips and jokes that adults might get, but they're not like offhanded. They do add to the story, so it doesn't feel like they just dropped in some bombs for adults. The whole like theme starts with adults and like ends with a family, so you feel like it's equally attuned for both. When I was a kid, I was angriest about the ending.
What about the ending? I
didn't like that Aggie the witch like forgave everyone and was put to rest. I think I was a vengeful child. I was like, she should have remained angry and cursed them all. But now I don't feel that. So I think I just grew up.
Yeah, she was a pretty mature child, I guess. Like all it took was another, I guess, someone to say, oh, I feel you, Aggie. I feel the same way. And then she's like, yeah, I gotta forgive everyone. I was like, wow, you're a pretty mature child for your age. She was like, I forgot how old she was. She's no older than like 11 or something. And she's like, okay, I'll stop the 300-year curse because this is the first time someone talked to me. Like, wow.
So do you not dislike that anymore? I guess.
I think I could excuse it because of the length of the movie. So by the time we get there, I see that there's only like 20-ish minutes left. And I'm like, oh, obviously they're going to wrap it up as a plot point now that I can see how stories are built a lot better, or like, you know, I can dissect a movie faster. I'm not expecting the resolution to be as dramatic, because for me, watching it as an adult, I see that ParaNorman's plot points are evenly dropped throughout the film. Like they have his resolution with his sister, resolution with his friends, resolution with bullies, resolution with his parents, way before you even get to that point. So the putting to rest of Aggie's spirit is the icing on the cake that is required for the safety of the town, but not for any of Norman's development. So I didn't have any investment in how well that or how poorly that went as an adult. But as a kid, I was like, obviously that's the most important thing, saving the town. Who cares if everybody shoots each other in the town anyway after you've like saved it?
Yeah, I feel like it goes along with how a lot of fairy tales and a lot of children's movies end, is to really show the best case scenario for kids. I would imagine if a kid saw this, I'm like, wow, she just did that. Like maybe I could do that too, to be a little bit more forgiving, more easily, instead of being, more realistic about it. But yeah, it's similar to how other children animations are resolved. There's usually almost not a lot of resistance after a certain point, especially at the, like you said, it's towards the end of the movie. Yeah.
I think I've had the opposite sort of development. So I don't want to compare it directly to a lynching, but I think there are elements that are, very, very different, but very kind of similar in terms of the sort of trial she gets with the town. And this is not very, it's not, the thing that characterizes a lynching is the vigilantism and the step away from the state to enact justice. And in colonial Boston, or in colonial Massachusetts Bay, it was the state that was enacting the sort of, if you can call it a state, because it as a settler colony, it's not really a state as we kind of understand what that means. So it is sort of vigilantism in the way they kind of take care of Agatha. And so I think that thinking about that, but also don't want to compare it to a lynching, because that was a very totally different scenario, and it wasn't meant to instill terror on like a subject or particular subset of people, the witch trials. But I think that thinking about it in those kind of terms, I would, if we had sort of like a similar story with like a freedman from the 1880s and the same town, and the kids trying to have him not wreak vengeance and then just accept that he was killed, that kind of, I don't know, presents sort of issues to me, in that whether it was justified to the assailants, it's sort of like, yeah, bad things happen to these people, so they should just let it go because time's gone by. And I'm like, well, yeah, you could argue that, but I would argue that, that there needs to be some sort of true material, I don't want to use reparations, but, reparations. And it can't rest on like an idealist, well, we've all learned our lesson now, so that should be good enough for you, right?
I gave this film a thumbs up, but it's as in, I like this movie, but I have a lot of questions and thoughts about this movie. I do agree with what Christian said. I think he probably has thought more about this than I did in the past couple hours since I've seen the film. But I also I didn't feel like I felt like the movie just wrapped up a lot of its points very quickly. I think the three main things for me was, the Agatha moment and the way her story both started and ended felt a little unearned and just very, very quick. Like we don't know who she is until late in the film, and her story, I felt like needed a bit more fleshing out to make the moments between her and Norman have a bit more weight. I think it probably works out well with kids. I think for me, I just felt like it needed a bit more. Something else I didn't about the ending, I didn't like how Courtney was the one who stood up for Norman. I like that she stood up for him, but I didn't like how in doing that, she took the agency away from him, because it became her moments rather than Norman's moments. And it wasn't satisfying that the town people still never listened to Norman. Like his story is about nobody's listening to me. he's being neglected and he's being abused. And when it comes to be his moment to tell the people the truth, to tell the people what's on his mind and to speak up for himself, nobody listens to him. And it's not like Courtney says, hey, listen up, listen to my brother. She says, hey, listen up. And then she just tells everything. And she takes over. And I didn't like that particular moment. And the third thing I didn't like was I felt like the dad, they pushed the father character too far. I feel like the way that he shifted from his abusive, or I don't know if it was abusive or just generally disdainful attitude toward Norman, this sudden shift at the very end toward being a nice Norman I didn't feel like his character earned that either.
I don't think he developed either. I think even at the end when he's like saying hi to his dead mom, he sort of, or even before that even, but like throughout like the resolution, he just seems very like, he still seems very skeptical.
Oh yeah.
Like, and I'm like, dude, a dead witch has come from the beyond to like wreak havoc on your town. You can see it with your own eyes. And he's still very like hesitant to like accept Norman's, account of things that have been happening to him.
I think at the end, I think you can explain it as, he's at the end, he's starting on the path toward being a better dad. But I would have liked to see that path start sooner, or at least, not in the last minute of the film. And so we see a little bit of progress in that direction rather than just that one little sample. Those are my main three main concerns with the end of the film.
I think with like people listening to Courtney over Norman shows a bit of realism because she had a better reputation. It shows that the people didn't really are not all the way in to accepting Norman into the society and considering him as like one of their own, which is sad, but I guess that's me trying to process why they did that. But I think they just did it to resolve that plot point of Courtney never listening to Norman. I think that's why they did it. But another way to think about it, I guess, is just people didn't really are not 100% there yet in accepting him, which is very realistic. Even after experiencing all of the craziness, I think it's that's a very possible situation in a very impossible situation.
But I think the impossibility of that scenario just sort of like takes away what you can. I don't know. I've never been through the apocalypse.
Zombies? Yeah.
The apocalypse, but I feel like the situation would bring out a different, or I think the situation might have played out differently. It's not like, I don't know what a similar situation would be, but I don't think that the response was all that.
I think, yeah, if Courtney's being, if that's realistic, I think your point about, her maybe having a voice for Norman is maybe more realistic, but the mob itself was just, their behavior was completely unrealistic. I get, what the film is trying to show in terms of mob mentality, but the sudden spark and the ridiculous nature of their antics and the cartoonish, mob mentality, the hive mind they seem to have, that the way they all instantly stopped just because of her, I feel like that kind of doesn't work for me if we go with the realism route.
I guess so. The way that I would see that is, I agree that with Sarah that it's more realistic for Courtney to be the one who's saying it and presenting it, because for me it's not so much about like they all, oh, okay, Courtney said it, so we're holding up. It's that a lot of the movie is about in-group, out-group. And again, like the mob internalizes that everybody in the town is part of the in-group except for like Norman and his uncle, right? And his uncle is a representation of like, Norman, if you keep being weird, you're gonna be like your uncle, right? And even the other characters who like are quirky, the delinquent, the like nerdy kid who's his friend, who's like a little overweight, right? Like they don't seem to face as much of the same problems. Sure, his other friend also gets bullied, but Norman is always the one who's constantly picked on through the whole movie. So he's always the one outsider. And that's why the parallel to him and Aggie makes sense to me. So I don't really need more exposition on Aggie. And as an adult, I can see the like defense from Courtney makes sense when he goes and helps Aggie, because he tells her, it doesn't like, I understand your rage and I do want to hurt those people, but like inducing rage is just going to it's not going to help anybody. It's not going to make me better and it's not going to make them better. So just focus on the people who actually help you. And that's harking back to the development that we see in their squad to that point, right? He gets to the forest with his family, but it's not really about his family, right? His family didn't go through that development with him. It's really about like the people who he made that journey with, and knowing that at least somebody was willing to listen to him. He acknowledges that not everybody did, you know, the other people who killed Aggie, they don't care and they're not going to know they died and they made a mistake. But she's like, or Norman says, if there's at least one person who was like good to you, you should honor them with like your life as well. I don't think he necessarily negates the anger she feels. For me as an adult, I see her being put to rest as an acceptance of like all of her pain and like a sense of happiness. You can be angry about everything that happened and acknowledge it. And Norman says like, basically, I'm going to live on and remember all of this shit that happened to you and still find peace for yourself. Like you don't have to live a life of anger.
I guess adding on to, I remember what Norman said, what he said to Agatha was, when people are scared, they do bad things. They do things that out of fear. I wasn't really a fan of that throughout the film because I think it was used in so many situations where Norman was supposed to come to terms with the situation rather than everyone else who has wronged him and wronged Agatha. But I do agree with how that Norman did approach it as, hey, think about your mommy as, you know, the only person who believed you, took care of you, instead of thinking of the people who've done you wrong. But I didn't like the lesson of people acting out of fear and they do bad things, because it kind of just brushes it off and says, yeah, they were scared.
Yeah, this movie has a lot of points where it's like it tries to drop in the lessons. It starts to and it's like, talk to people so you can actually get to the bottom of your issues. People can be scared and that's why they'll react badly. And it's like, okay, but you didn't put those two ideas together, right? Like Aggie wasn't gonna sit down and talk to the people that wanted to kill her, right? Like that wasn't feasible for her situation. So are you just saying that her death was inevitable?
I don't know if there's an easy way to connect those two, because I mean, even if you try to talk to people, you know, if they're scared, they're not going to be logicked out of their emotions. So I feel like it's sort of tapping into something 8 years earlier. Maybe the conversation was ongoing then, but I think it's a tapping into this question of what do you do when bad things happen for maybe not so bad reasons.
Bad things happening because of not so bad. Oh,
like not so for not bad like, reasons, but because of like a miscommunication.
Okay, so not like people acting out of fear, but people acting out of misunderstanding.
Well, misunderstanding, but I mean that encompasses the lashing out for fear. I'm just like broadening at the. or generalizing. And I think even today, there are not the solutions that we once might have thought did exist. Like I'm thinking of racism again. So like in the 90s, right, we thought, oh, racism's over because the civil rights movement happened. And then, you know, that's laxity sort of sparked, you know, a new wave or different wave of, you know, racist behaviors that people are trying to mend now. So I feel like in 2012, people, you know, established people had some idea of like, oh, this is the solution that will work. Now, you know, 8 or 7 years later, we kind of like, well, those solutions aren't, you know, totally effective. So I just think, I just think that, you know, like there's no good conclusion to the premise that they came in with, whether it was produced in 2012 or now. I think the premise is just, you know, riddled with problems.
Yeah, there are definitely some pretty serious loose threads. I think this is a great movie to like watch with your kid because there are a lot of different things to take away from it. And your kid will probably, like, as we've noted, wash over some of these plot details. Then you can like pick and choose how you want to talk about with your kid. But for me, watching it as like a cool animated film, I'm like, I would prefer someone here to discuss some of this than to just walk away and be like, yeah, cool. Because then they make references to the Scooby-Doo movies, like the Scooby-Doo Halloween. Yeah, it does feel kind of like that, where like the movie ends and like sometimes the person who gets taken away or like the person who committed the crime in Scooby-Doo is like actually fighting against a corporation or something. And you're like, I kind of agree with that person. And they go to jail and you're like, what? Like this movie kind of gives me the same feel at the end in some regards. Maybe Leica just wasn't there yet with their storytelling, because let's look at what they did before this, right? They'd done Corpse Bride, they'd done Coraline. They hadn't done their original stories before, really.
Did they do Corpse Bride?
So Corpse Bride, even though it's a Tim Burton movie, Leica was the one who did all of the stop motion.
Oh,
so they are not credited being the like studio who produced it, but they were the production team.
Okay, so they weren't like involved in the story making?
Nope.
They were just involved in the production elements, like just the animation.
Mm-hmm. So okay. This is their first storytelling voyage.
Yeah, they did it's like a pretty amazing feat, actually. Apparently it's the first full color printers for puppet making. Black and white was Coraline. 3D printing. So like full color and then black and white for Coraline. And it was like 3 years of production. So that's crazy long. And apparently for a day, an animator was able to animate about 4.30 something seconds of the film. So the amount of work, I think, was more geared towards doing that rather than fleshing out each story point and takeaways. I think there are takeaways. I think for me at least, the biggest takeaway is more of how to deal with anything that is, I guess, like negative against you rather than pleasing everyone. It's more of a coming to terms with people hating you or being an outsider rather than trying to come to terms with other people or try to please them or trying to belong, but coming to terms with what you have and what might be perceived. So I think it's more of an internal thing, accepting what you have and what you don't have, rather than pleasing a mob and trying to belong in the city or like the society. So
have you guys seen Kubo and the Two Strings?
I haven't, but my mom and my brother love it. And I've seen so many shots from it. I follow Leica on TikTok and they have a lot of videos of like the production of Kubo, which is so cool. So one day I have to sit down and watch it.
Yeah, I think during this movie, I was thinking a lot about Kubo because I enjoyed Kubo a lot more than this one, and it was just cool to see kind of go back and see what their earlier storytelling methods and animation styles were like. Because I think in the 4 years between the release of ParaNorman and Kubo, they definitely improved on both significantly. We're not talking about Kubo, but I think it was just cool to see. You can kind of you can see the way the style. At least I saw the way the styles kind of evolved and progressed. And
Yeah.
that
I
was a
mean,
cool
if we're
thing to think
talking
about.
complexity too, ParaNorman, as Zara said, like an animator could complete 4 seconds in a day. For Kubo and the Two Strings and Missing Link, it would take the entire team 1 week to produce 3 to 4 seconds of content for the movie. So the level of complexity they've gone for in their last two movies is insane. And I think ParaNorman was the jumping point for them to saying, like, we can do stuff on our own, we can make our own stories. And there was a lot more support for them after that. Because they busted out ParaNorman, then it was Box Trolls, then it was Kubo. So they did like ParaNorman that won so many awards. Box Trolls was garbage. No offense to Box Trolls. It was okay. And then they were like, okay, guys, we got to get it together. We got to figure it out. We can't have another failure. And they released Kubo. And everyone was like, oh, nice.
Yeah, but even though this was like one of their first like huge movie, it was, I thought it was just visually fantastic. I just loved all the little details they put in. I think one of the earlier shots when Norman's walking to school, and it's the shot like from the ground of the bicycle next to the fence, and you got the blades of grass. It was just such a nice, kind of calming thing to look at. The shot, the establishing shot where he's like walking down the street. It was everything was just crafted very well, and I think it definitely helped a lot that it was just built in such a stunning environment.
Yeah. Speaking of that scene when he was seeing the ghosts for the first time, I would have liked it more if we have seen more of involvement of the dead people throughout the film, because after he arrived in the school, the next dead person he sees is his uncle after he dies, and then after that you don't see anyone, you don't see any ghosts anymore, and then you see the undead. That's it.
That's true. Yeah.
That's another problem I had, or that was another problem, because to me it sets up Norman's situation well, but that sort of feature of the story just seemed set up for how Norman would find out from his uncle that this was his mission, and then I would have expected that they would have helped him sort of find where the grave was, or find which book to look in, or something later. And then, but yeah, we don't see them anymore. Or maybe I don't know what the relationship between ghosts and zombies are, but like maybe a ghost talks to a zombie and then like relays the information to Norman, and that I think would have made more sense. But yeah, my issues primarily are with the story.
Yeah. When his friends decided to leave him, or for that brief moment, I thought the ghosts were going to step in and try to help him find the book, but instead, the zombies came. The talking to the dead only came when, like, hey, why don't you use your powers? You could talk to the dead. You're the only person. I think his abilities were used for like 3 different purposes: to be an outsider, to talk to his uncle, and to talk to the dead in terms of saving everyone from the witch curse. Like,
I forget
those
his
are
grandma.
the 3 main things. And his grandma. Number 4.
No, you're right. I didn't even think of that. And I think probably because the way the movie was, I guess it's probably partially on me, maybe partially on the movie for not following up on that, because I think at some point during the movie, I forgot about the ghost thing. I was getting into the witch plot, and I think my mind kind of shifted. But yeah, that's the one most significant character traits is that he can talk to ghosts. And yeah, to not include that throughout the movie as like a significant part of his identity, yeah, that is kind of a failure.
Also, I don't know if anyone else had this problem, but I see like ghost movie and zombie movie not always in the same category. And they show Norman being really into zombies, but then they're like, he can talk to ghosts. So I'm like, you need to just say for 5 seconds he can talk to dead people and say it as dead people and not ghosts. Because then I would have looked at the zombies and been like, yeah, he can talk to them. Because at both times when I watch this movie, when he starts talking to the zombies, I'm like, why would he also be able to talk to zombies? I'm like, wait, oh, I get it. They're both dead, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But the barrier for me was too strong.
He's like Harry Potter with snakes. He doesn't know it until it happens.
Whoa.
I guess we could move on to, I mean, we kind of brushed upon the supporting characters, but for like a good portion of the movie, we see him with his friends, and they were kind of like a Scooby-Doo gang. The I think the police officer, I don't know if she was a police officer, but she said something about meddling kids, and then she says Jinky. So I think that's the only Scooby-Doo reference that I remember clearly.
They're also like driving in a van. The order of the seating in the van is a Scooby-Doo ordering. They, after the police officer like gets into the crowd, the person she talks to uses a Shaggy voice. And we haven't seen that police officer the whole film until that point. I'm trying to remember what else. And yeah, the like character types of the 5 in the van.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just Scooby-Doo, though. I think it's just chock full of references to Scooby-Doo, but also horror films.
Yeah.
The main ones that they cite are like the Goonies, Ghostbusters, and Scooby-Doo. That's like explicitly from the creators of the movie.
Makes sense.
But it's like general 80s animation with some paranormal aspects to it.
I think part of the challenge they probably had, and they probably did this themselves, was that they were trying to balance a whole bunch of tones and a whole bunch of elements, trying to fit it all into this movie. I think sometimes for me the switch from horror to comedy and to homage or something, it all kind of it didn't go together quite as well as I probably would have liked. But maybe a rewatch will when I'm not, I think I was thinking too hard when I was watching the movie. But then I forgot about no, but then I wasn't, because I forgot about the whole ghost thing. So I guess I wasn't thinking at all.
I mean, maybe you were thinking hard about other things. I mean, that's...
Has anyone seen Frankenweenie?
No.
Frankenweenie was the Tim Burton animated film that came out the same year, 2012. And so it was in like Frankenweenie. I remember I watched both of them in theaters, and I couldn't help but compare the two then. And still, when I watch this, I'm like, oh yeah, they are the same setting, very similar topic. But the only thing is, like, I don't like Frankenweenie's story as much, but I feel like it's so much more cohesive than ParaNorman. But I like the way ParaNorman looks, and like I like the characters better. So I almost wish that those two movies had figured out the opposite elements and just smashed into a better movie.
Maybe we'll get like the Aliens versus Predators version of ParaNorman versus Frankenweenie.
Was it from a different studio? Frankenweenie is
Tim Burton.
Okay. This one was
not as acclaimed or as I would say deep as ParaNorman. It's like a kid who loves science and his dog, and he brings his dog back to life, right?
Sounds like its title.
Yeah. Oh no, it's only 87 minutes, so like even shorter than ParaNorman. I guess it's about the same. They're both set in high school or like in school for the most part. Very similar.
Yeah. So I guess I think Does anyone have a favorite character? For some reason, Neil is my favorite. I don't know why, but I think I enjoyed his quips, but he kind of became like a stereotypical
Sidekick.
comic relief sidekick character, but that seems to work. It worked for me. But yeah, does anyone like any character more than the others for specific reasons? Because you kind of have like each, it's like the Scooby-Doo gang. You have the quote-unquote Fred-ish. You kind of had a Velma-ish. I mean, there's no Velma. There's a Daphne, I think.
I don't think there is a one-to-one.
There's no one-to-one.
I think it stops at
Fred and Daphne. Yeah.
I didn't like anybody in this movie.
You didn't like even the grandma?
Mm-mm.
My favorite maybe is Potato, the lost dog.
We never meet.
Yeah.
We never meet.
Or Neil's bifurcated dog.
It wasn't a speaking role.
No. But yeah, I think it started at the beginning. I did like at the start the voiceover performances, but I think as it progressed, something about the way the kids interacted, and then Mitch showed up, and then I don't know, I just started not to like it anymore. At least the characters, I was like, oh, this could be fun, and then I don't know, it just kind of devolved for me.
That's what I'm saying. It develops poorly.
Yeah.
I feel like that's true for a lot of movies. Like, we had a great idea.
My favorite character is the drama teacher.
How realistic was the drama teacher? Because I was never part of theater, but I feel like
I didn't have any experiences like that. No, but I thought she was hilarious.
She was abrasive, I thought. She seemed very opportunistic. I didn't like that.
Well, she's not a good person, but I think she's funny.
I agree she's funny, but she's funny, but also I didn't like her.
Her puppet looked so realistic. I feel like she was the most believable puppet out of everyone for some reason. I don't know why, but she looked the most realistic to me.
Because we have a trope for that, like, teacher, female teacher who's like really big, strong, and scary. So every show with the school in it has that kind of thing going for it.
But this teacher was so like athletic. She's like running quickly, jumping on tables or jumping on cars, and like hailing the charge.
You like hear the car like the metal like groaning under her pressure.
You have to be crazy fit when you're in drama. I bet she sword fights in her spare time. She's just full af.
She probably like lifts more like twice her body weight or something.
She ran through a wood fence without flinching.
How does the animation in this movie compared to the ones we watched or you watched before? How does it compare to what other claymation movie have we watched in this? We had how did this compare to the other movies?
I don't know if we watched other claymation films.
We watched our favorite.
But that wasn't clay.
Was it not?
Is that categorized as claymation? I thought that was just stop motion.
Was it clay?
No, those were like toy figures.
We're talking about Anomalisa, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Anomalisa is 3D printed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Isn't ParaNorman also predominantly not clay?
Yeah, they still call it clay, but it's predominantly 3D printed. Yeah.
Isle of Dogs? Was that?
Yeah.
Isle of Dogs.
What was that made of?
It's another stop motion film. Yeah, how did those I feel like this was so smooth though. There were like some moments that I forget that this is these were puppets. Especially if I don't see their faces. It's so smooth. At least I don't remember much of Isle of Dogs, but I don't remember being as impressed with the movements. maybe that was also part of the charm of the movie Isle of Dogs. But this one was, I guess, like the first time I was so impressed with stop motion. But my only experience with stop motion movies were the movies we watched and the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, which was like a long time ago. So it's not a very
from the 60s.
Yes,
50s.
it's not a good library of stop motion movies.
I agree. This was nice to look at. Nicer to look at than Isle of Dogs. Although I thought Isle of Dogs was more impressive. Just like the way they captured the small things. Like
definitely the composition and Wes Anderson's touch.
Yeah.
And if we're comparing it to Anomalisa, I think part of the thing is that Anomalisa's stop motion was that it was like the textures were so grainy. But I think that's part of the one reason I kind of like Anomalisa is that it looks very, very fake.
You're supposed to be disturbed the whole way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I don't know.
I feel like it all in their own way. Each of the movies feels like it was the way it was animated felt right for that specific movie. For Isle of Dogs, even though it's like it wasn't as smooth, but I think that was on purpose, and the focus was not on like look at how cool and how great we could make these puppets move realistically. Same for Anomalisa. It definitely worked out for it.
Yeah, I feel like ParaNorman, you could have told the same story in a different medium, and so Laika almost takes on a whole nother challenge to replicate what we understand to be a pretty common life, or common tropes. We've seen them represented very well in live action, and so for things to be so smooth is pretty amazing. I think the shots are really complex. They do some pans, they do some like front-facing ones where they have to like backlight some of the characters, and those things are hard. In that regard, I think it's more complicated than Isle of Dogs. I was not deeply impressed with Isle of Dogs in the shot directions that they chose, but I don't expect that movie to be complex in the shots. You know what I mean? Like Wes Anderson has a very formulaic way of doing things. So I'm like, all right, I get it, fit the formula. But for this, the fact that it feels so natural is a marvel. Though I remember when I watched this, I was a little upset because I immediately compared to Coraline. And Coraline is whimsical, but that's the story. And now that I'm older, I can see like, oh, okay, like they're just not in the same environment. And they were still able to make realism happen with stop motion. So I can credit them for that. And also for not doing the exact same thing that they did with Coraline or Corpse Bride, both of which are, Halloween-y.
And neither of which are Frankenweenie. Sorry.
I was thinking about saying.
What is this Frankenweenie slander?
Slander. I wasn't slanderizing.
I have to watch Frankenweenie now.
Let's watch it next month.
Yeah, I can't believe I didn't know that it takes like 3 years. Like people spend more than a year in production for films. At least it's nice to know as an animator that you have a job for the next 3 years, right? That's pretty cool. Yeah, I think this is the most impressed I've been for like a stop motion film. I wasn't so impressed about the music though. There was this one moment when he first came across with his first interaction with his uncle. I forgot how it went, but I just didn't like the music in that specific scene. That's the only thing I remember about the music. Everything else I felt like it's just like complimentary. But there's this I think there's like a couple notes it's like over and over again for like almost a minute. and it was just annoying. I don't know if I could pull it up, and but yeah, I didn't like that. That's my memories of how music was done in this film.
At the start, they have, it starts us off in the movie that Norman's watching with his grandmother. That's kind of a throwback to the 80s slasher movies or just classic zombie movies. I was kind of hoping that we'd get more of like an 80s inspired kind of electro, early synth kind of soundtrack. And we did have like moments where like there was a kind of like a synth kind of layer underlying the scene. I was hoping that we had more of that, but it was good. I liked what we got. Just wish there was more.
I think it was ahead of its time in including some of those notes. I also wish that there was more. And like when you see the drive-in scenes now, I think if you'd never seen this movie before and you only watch Netflix, you might look at that and say like, oh yeah, that's just like the opening scene in Sabrina, the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, or be like, oh, it's just like the opening scene of Stranger Things, and then like the few notes are the same. So I won't ding them for that. They were ahead of their time and even including synth.
I don't like what's his name, John Bryan. Partly because
what did he do to you?
He wrote the music to Lady Bird. So I will forever have that association. Okay. But it's also always like after I've watched the film and I'm going through the IMDb things, I'm like, who wrote the music? Oh, John Bryan. That kind of explains things.
Wow. There's like Lady Bird trauma involved.
Mm-hmm.
Just Lady Bird induced rage.
Mm-hmm. Sure,
I feel like the sound design in this movie, though. You have to I said I did like the sound design in this movie. I think Christian and I overlapped. I thought a lot of they were very creative with it. I think the most noticeable is, at the during Norman's confrontation with Aggie, there are two particular moments, when she's whispering in his ear, and when we cut to white and we have the complete silence. I think those are two very strong creative sound decisions that worked very well. Yeah, I think it definitely for a movie that takes place in an animated world, one that's completely created. Every aspect of it is created. I thought the sounds were just it all matched the universe very well, and the crunching, lots of crunching, which I liked. Yeah, it was just everything was done with the. I made a comment about how I wasn't sure about how they balanced the tones, but I did really enjoy the humor that was in the movie. I think a lot of the sounds brought humor and enhanced the humor in the scenes. So I thought that worked well.
Speaking of that scene, I had a hard time trying to get in the groove with that scene because it was, like you said, it like the tonal differences, like sudden switch of tone. I felt like when he was confronting Agatha, when everything became so magical and he was like falling off rocks that were floating and all the different colors introduced. I was trying to be comfortable, or at least like accept it, or and understand how it was integrated in the film. But since it was such a drastic shift when he got into like the electric stuff, and Agatha being an electric light. Yeah, I felt like it was so it took me by surprise. I don't know if everyone else feels a level of that.
Did you guys also feel very uncomfortable during the scene where Norman's trying to pry the book out of his dead uncle's hands?
Yes.
I felt it was quite
He's
disgusting.
been dead for like a day or two.
I'm glad they didn't show like the amount of decay that probably would have happened, but also it was still a dead body, And when the tongue fell out and he started licking his face, I'm like, oh man, this is gnarly. This is a bold step.
Yeah, I think they did a good job in like inducing those feelings without creating as much jump scare or horror as some other films do. So I was like, this is a good step for kids if you're trying to get them into something a little creepy without like emotionally manipulating them. I thought that was a great note because the kids can kind of understand the pain, but it also humanized it. He was like, look, I just have to do it, and it's just a dead body. Like, he's not here anymore. I gotta do what I gotta do. I'm gonna wrestle a corpse. And I'm like, that's the level of creepy that I can deal with showing a child, in comparison to Frankenweenie, where he like electrocutes his dog to bring it back to life. I get it, Frankenstein, but I'm still like, I didn't want to see that. That still makes me upset forever. Yeah. I like that it was a little unnerving.
Yeah, I think they're definitely on, like, they're teetering on the fence of like, is this more for adults or more for kids? Because there were a lot of like moments, I think, that definitely adults noticed a lot more. In terms of the horror, when he's walking down the street and talking to the ghosts, you can see like how each one of them died, and they're all kind of gruesome. Like, you got the gangster who's got the cement around his feet. You have the lady who with the hair dryer who said something about like, I was about to take a shower or something. You know what happened. But like, it's similar to Corpse Bride or Nightmare Before Christmas. There's that just enough magic and fun and humor and whimsy that kind of push against the more scary elements, and I think makes it more palatable for kids. I think it worked. I think that it did work well for this movie.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking 2012, still less scary than most things that were on the internet if you were on Tumblr at the time. So,
oh man,
the win for me.
Yeah, I'm glad that they didn't go too far, or else they weren't be able to, the obvious target audience, at least for the most part, were kids. If it was too scary, it wouldn't have worked, because like adults could see through the holes of what they're trying to, say. And if it's like too scary for kids, like, who's this movie supposed to be for? Like, except for maybe animation enthusiasts who could appreciate the amount of time and effort and like how beautiful the film was made. Any other things that we missed, or anything that anyone wants to talk about?
There are two moments I thought were particularly funny. Just, I don't know, they weren't like laugh out loud. One of them was they're like finishing up with their show, and they're all on stage singing "Season of the Witch." I thought it was like they had this show about a witch 300 years ago, yet they're singing this rock song from the 60s very poorly. That tickled me. And then when Prendergast's ghost comes to visit him in the washroom, he like demands Norman, swear that you'll swear. You mean like the F word? I wasn't expecting that, but
yeah,
totally by surprise. I thought that was a good line.
Oh, I like when Neil was calling Norman, or like he texted him. It's like, look out the window, and he has a ski mask. Yeah,
hockey mask.
A hockey mask. Ski mask would not have been scary, but a hockey mask.
You wear that during ski?
Scare a bunch of people.
There's no law against it.
Wouldn't hurt, like the wind rushing through the little holes.
Yeah.
Like, oh.
Keeps you awake.
Oh yes, the epidemic of sleepy skiers. Forget.
Hey, it's happened. If it's happened to one skier, it's happened to them all.
Also, the fact that they had the banner with a witch hanging off a tree, and they're on this like above the stage for the school play. I was like, that's kind of a nice thing to put in your public schools.
Yeah. Their whole town is the the only part of its identity that they show, maybe the only part that's relevant, is that they had this witch that they killed 300 years ago. Everything's named after this witch.
Also like a tourist attraction.
Their one claim to fame.
I'm going to talk about something that I didn't like, which I kind of am on the fence about, or debating in my own head. But there's this sort of, I don't know what you call it, hindsight moralism that's sort of going on in the film. And like when Norman sort of confronts the undead founders, he chastises them, like, how could you do this to a little girl? And I'm like, well, yeah, and in 2020, 2012, 300 years after the fact, it's sort of like kind of realized, yeah, that wasn't the right call. But also, it is 1712, and they have different information than we do, so you can't criticize them morally for that. And sort of the film's understanding of Massachusetts Bay colonizers was sort of like, this isn't how things were. I think if these people came back from the dead, they sort of, when they're seeing things in the town with like the ad for, like, I think it was like a McDonald's restaurant or something, and then a lingerie store, and they're like, you know, I thought that was good, but then, you know, they also sort of like remorseful for what they did. Whereas I'm thinking, if these people were to come back to life, they would have been like, I have no qualms about what I did back then. It sort of like projects backwards sort of ideals that they wouldn't have had, which I find people doing a lot as an historian. That is sort of like bad, not something you should be doing, but also doesn't excuse what they did. It's just the means of like understanding this is where they were coming from, and this is what happened, and what happened.
Yeah. I think it's fair to judge them from our position, but of course it's very important to understand that their lives were very different from ours, and that they had very different belief systems and values. So yeah, I think it's definitely important to understand what they did wrong. But I understand what you're saying, that, you know, these are people who lived very different lives. I don't think the film is going too deep on the historicity of what Blythe. What's the name? Hollow. Blythe Hollow. Yeah, it's a good thought to bring up.
Yeah, I don't know if like they really thought hard on it, except for the the comedic quips of the McDonald's lingerie and like some tech stuff that they saw. I think they just like, okay, it just people, they just made they just put them as like people who thought for some reason they were able to think about what they've done and see that it is wrong, not necessarily on a certain belief system or certain how the pilgrims thought and their belief systems. They just like, oh, people who have thought about the misdoings that they've had in the past and now they feel bad, and saying, hey, everybody shouldn't do what the same mistakes that we made. Kind of simple, kind of like, hey, we learned blah blah blah. Yeah, they didn't really, I don't think they put much thought into that.
But yeah, it is good for us to think about that in a lot of these films that do kind of feature elements from the past.
Yeah, and just in some ways, I'm very like early 20th century progressive. Particularly in my like faith and expert opinion. And so when a film sort of tackles like some sort of history, I think, the studio should, invest, for a day in like having a historian looking over something. But I think more so, I think I often think of things like that. And when it comes to like science things, like why not just pay a scientist from the neighborhood university to come over for a day to look over your science and
No,
make sure
we shouldn't do that. I feel like for science though, there's a little less potential repercussions or whatever, because people for science it's not as okay. I guess they use a different term or incorrect term. It doesn't really affect anyone. It doesn't. It does minimize the I guess the achievements in a certain field to a certain extent, but it won't. Let's say if a film didn't do enough research on a certain group of people and misrepresents them in like a small way, that could actually affect a certain audience and have maybe give a bad rep or a misrepresentation. So in science, it's, I guess, okay, but not really. Just less negative side effects. I guess it's the only side effect is miseducation, but no one really listens to the science in these films. So let's move on to the ratings. Christian, count us off again.
Sheldon.
I give it a 6.5.
Ainley.
I give it a 8.25.
Zara.
7. I gave it a 7. Wrote it down at the beginning.
Okay, I gave it a 5 and 5.85. Yeah, rounds to 5 3/4.
That's less than last week's.
5 and yes, it was for me.
That rounds up to a 7.
Rounds up to 7. Yeah.
Total.
Which makes it not the highest rated film. The
somewhere in the middle.
4 months. Second highest film.
Past 4 months.
Past 4 weeks. House
4 months.
is still on top. And the new lowest rated film is How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Congratulations, Sheldon.
Wow. This is a brutal crowd.
Yeah, screw Christmas.
And good job, Zara.
I'm pretty disappointed that it's not a low score. I feel like I need to get back on my low score group.
That just about wraps up this meeting of the Anarcho-Syndicalist Film Club. There's a lot more to discuss, so please offer your comments using the hashtag ASFC on Facebook, Twitter, or your favorite social media platform. Be sure to join us next week as we discuss Breathless, 1960. Catch you on the flip side.